"I just want to see my balance," she said. The bank manager laughed until he saw the screen. The morning Norah Elaine walked into Crestwood Savings Bank. She was wearing a coat 2 sizes too big, the sleeves hanging past her wrists, and shoes that had been resoled so many times the bottom was smooth as glass. She was 9 years old. She carried a canvas tote bag her mother had sewn from flour sacks, and inside it, wrapped in a piece of cloth and held together with a rubber band, was a small white envelope her mother had given her the day before she died. Crestwood was not a big town. The bank sat on the corner of Maple and 4th, between a hardware store and a diner that had been there since 1962. Everyone in Crestwood knew everyone else, which meant that when a 9-year-old girl with dusty knees and a too large coat pushed through the glass door on a Tuesday morning, people noticed. Norah had walked 4 miles to get there. She had no bus fare. She stopped just inside the door and looked around. The bank smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee. A woman behind the counter smiled at her carefully, the way adults smile when they are not sure what they are looking at. 2 men in suits near the window glanced over and then glanced away. A teller named Ruth watched her with quiet attention. Norah walked to the counter. She placed both hands flat on the surface and looked up. "I'd like to check my balance, please," she said. "My mother left me a card. She said to come here if I ever needed to know." She set the envelope on the counter and opened it with the careful hands of someone who had practiced this moment. Inside was a bank card, old and slightly warped, the numbers worn at the edges. The name on it was not her mother's. It read, "Norah Elaine Sutter, minor account holder." Ruth took the card gently. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me take a look." That was when the door at the back of the bank opened and Gerald Marsh walked in. Gerald Marsh was the branch manager of Crestwood Savings. He was 53 years old, had managed this branch for 11 years, and had developed over that time a particular way of looking at people that told them immediately where he believed they ranked. He wore the same charcoal suit every Tuesday and kept a small American flag pin on his lapel that he polished on Friday afternoons. He had never been cruel in any dramatic way. He was the quieter kind of dismissive, the kind that makes people feel invisible rather than attacked. He saw Norah at the counter and slowed his walk. He looked at the too large coat, the flour sack bag, the child's hands on the counter. He looked at Ruth holding the worn bank card with 2 fingers, as if she wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Gerald crossed to the counter. "What's this?" he said, not to Norah, to Ruth. Ruth explained quietly. The girl wanted to check a balance. A minor account. Card was in the child's name. Gerald looked at the card. Then he looked at Norah over his reading glasses. "Where are your parents?" "My mother passed away," Norah said. 6 days ago." A brief pause. "And your father?" "I don't have one." Gerald set the card on the counter. "Who brought you here today?" "I walked." Something moved across Gerald's face, not sympathy exactly. More like the particular impatience of a man whose morning had just been made complicated. He picked up the card again, turned it over, put it down. "These old accounts," he said, mostly to himself. "They're usually dormant, closed out." "There's probably nothing there." He looked at Ruth. "Run it. Let's not keep the girl waiting." The way he said it made Ruth press her lips together. She took the card to the terminal without a word. Norah stood at the counter with her hands folded in front of her. She was looking at a framed photograph on the wall behind Gerald, a black and white picture of the bank as it had been in 1951, smaller then, with a hand-painted sign above the door. She had the stillness of a child who had learned that stillness was safer than movement. Gerald poured himself a coffee from the side table and checked his watch. Ruth's face changed. It happened slowly. She looked at the screen, then looked again, then leaned forward slightly as if proximity would make the number more believable. She blinked. She straightened up. She looked at Gerald. "Mr. Marsh," she said. Her voice had gone careful and precise in the way voices go when something important is happening. "Could you come look at this?" Gerald exhaled through his nose and crossed to the terminal. He looked at the screen over Ruth's shoulder. His coffee cup lowered slowly to the counter without him noticing he had set it down. The balance was not empty. It was not the $15 or $20 that old dormant accounts sometimes held, collecting a few cents of interest across forgettable years. The number on the screen was large enough that Gerald read it 3 times. Then he reached past Ruth and entered his manager code to confirm the account was real and active, and exactly what it appeared to be. It was. Norah's mother, a woman named Carol Sutter, who had cleaned houses in Crestwood for 22 years, had once spent 3 months caring for an elderly man named Walter Briggs after his housekeeper retired. Walter Briggs had no children. He had made his money quietly, in land and timber, over 50 years, and he had lived the last decade of his life in a house that was too large and too quiet. Carol had brought him soup when he was sick, and read to him when his eyes were too tired to read himself, and never once treated him like a problem to be managed. When Walter died, his attorney had contacted no one in Crestwood. Walter had handled it himself years earlier, setting up a trust in the name of Carol's daughter, a child he had met twice and found remarkable both times. The trust had grown steadily for 7 years. Walter had structured it so that it would continue growing until the child was old enough to access it. He had not told Carol. He knew she would refuse it. Norah did not know any of this yet. She was still looking at the photograph on the wall. Gerald turned around slowly. He looked at the 9-year-old girl in the too large coat who had walked 4 miles in resoled shoes to check a balance her mother had told her to look for. He looked at the flour sack bag on the counter. He thought about the way he had said probably nothing there, mostly to himself, as if she couldn't hear him. "Norah," he said. She looked at him. He pulled out the chair from his desk, the good chair, the one he sat in during meetings with account holders he considered important, and carried it to the counter. He set it beside her. "Would you like to sit down?" he said. She looked at the chair, then at him. "Okay," she said, and sat. Gerald sat on the edge of the counter stool across from her. He folded his hands on the surface the way he did in meetings. Then he unfolded them. Then he looked at Ruth, who was watching him with an expression he deserved, and then back at Norah. "Your mother left you something," he said. "Something quite significant. Do you understand what a trust fund is?" Norah shook her head. "It means someone put money away for you, and it kept growing while it waited for you to come find it." He paused. "A man named Walter Briggs did that. Did your mother ever mention him?" Norah thought about it. She read to an old man sometimes. She said he liked poetry. Gerald nodded slowly. That was him. Norah was quiet for a moment. Outside, a truck went past on Maple Street. The American flag pin on Gerald's lapel caught the light. "Is there enough?" she asked. "I've been staying at Mrs. Calloway's next door, but she said she can only keep me a few more days, and I didn't know what to do after that." Gerald looked at her for a long moment. Something in his chest shifted in the uncomfortable way things shift when a person realizes they have been wrong about something they didn't know they believed. "Yes," he said quietly. "There is more than enough." Ruth had already reached for the phone to call the bank's client services attorney. She had also, without being asked, gone to the small kitchen at the back and come back with a glass of orange juice and 2 cookies on a napkin, which she placed in front of Norah without comment. Norah looked at the cookies, then at Ruth. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome, honey," Ruth said. Gerald spent the next hour making calls he did not usually make himself. He reached the county's family services office and explained the situation clearly, advocating for temporary placement with Mrs. Calloway while legal guardianship was sorted. He called the bank's attorney and arranged for a fiduciary to be assigned to protect Norah's account until she was of age. He walked Norah through what would happen next in language a 9-year-old could follow, stopping when she had questions and answering them without impatience. At one point, while they were waiting for a callback, Norah reached into her flour sack bag and took out a small paperback book. She looked at the cover for a moment, then held it out to Gerald. "My mother used to read this to me," she said. "She said it was Mr. Briggs's favorite." Gerald took it. It was a slim collection of poems, the cover worn soft, the pages marked with small pencil notes in a handwriting he didn't recognize. He turned it over carefully and handed it back. "You should keep that," he said. She put it back in the bag with both hands, the way you put something back that you were never really going to give away. When Norah left the bank that afternoon, Mrs. Calloway had come to walk her home. Gerald had called her himself. The too large coat was still too large. The shoes were still resoled. Nothing about the outside of her had changed, but she walked differently than she had walked in. Not faster or straighter, just less braced. The way a person walks when they are no longer preparing for the worst. Gerald stood at the window and watched them go down Maple Street until they turned the corner. Ruth came to stand beside him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "You pulled out the good chair," Ruth said finally. "I know," said Gerald. He went back to his desk. He sat down. He looked at the American flag pin on his lapel for a moment, then looked away. He had 11 more years in this branch, and he intended to be more careful about the way he said probably nothing there to people who had walked 4 miles to find out. Some lessons arrived dressed in too large coats, carrying books of poetry and flour sack bags, and asking for nothing more than the truth. The least a person can do is offer them a chair.